some tips, insights into maintaining calm and sanity during these chaotic times, especially for those who thrive on human interaction. So there's really two parts to this question, right? First is staying calm. And I love the fact that my mom is online because I'm going to use her as an example. I hope that's okay, Mom. And that is really, fear is an interesting emotion because it doesn't really exist other than in the future, in the unknown. There are feelings that, obviously, if you're staring the lion in the eye, but even then I would say that's more fight or flight. That's not actual fear, that you have to act at that moment. So fear is really something that only exists when there's room for it to exist. And that's mainly this concept of future that we carry around with us and the unknown. So one of the most effective ways of cutting back on fear is to minimize the space you give it, the attention that you give it. And that is really to break down your actions into smaller parts, smaller tasks. So I'm going to use my mom as an example. Within a year, she lost her husband and had triple bypass surgery. Lots of trauma there, lots of anxiety and fear that was in her body and built up. And it prevented her from traveling to see me and other places because of that built-in fear. It's a long trip. She resides in Germany. Shout out to everyone in Europe. And was the anxiety of taking on such a big trip was holding her back. And really what it was that helped her overcome this was to break down the trip into individual tasks. So you look at what you're doing one moment at a time. I'm folding my clothes. I'm putting my clothes into my suitcase. I'm carrying my suitcase. I'm taking one step down the stairs. I'm getting into the car. I'm sitting in the car. I'm sitting in the plane, at the airport, and so forth and so forth. You get the idea. Within each one of those moments, there's not enough room for there to be fear. You're so focused on the task that you've eliminated the space for fear to exist. Okay? And those who have experience with meditation, that's essentially a more advanced version of that, is that you focus down on your breath or parts of your body in the present moment, and there's really not enough space there for fear to exist, right? If it does pop up, again, it's important to let yourself feel that. That's probably one of the most practical, easiest way to stay calm and kind of block out the fear. It's really just break things down into individual tasks, one at a time. That should minimize a lot of it, a lot of the anxiety and fear. Okay? Yes, Ivan, that's being present. And that's a great point that even in my journey, presence is a big topic. Eckhart Tolle is out there and everyone, Deepak, everyone's talking about presence, right? And I've been to many, many of those events and retreats. And even the people that are there, they struggle with this idea of presence. You get it intellectually. We all understand that, I think. But in practice, how do you apply presence? And even the people at the resorts that go and are habitual retreat goers, like I was for a while, they struggle with this idea of how to implement that. Because there's really three parts to full integration. And there's the first part is it being exposed to information, which is hearing about it, reading about it, seeing about it. It's what we're doing right now. And the world has never been a better place for being exposed to information, whether you're seeking it or not. That was not the case for a very long time. Even 20 years ago, it was very difficult. There were, libraries and books, things like that. The second step is to intellectually understand the information. So you've been exposed to it, that's great, but you still have to grasp it at an intellectual level. And that's already where challenges begin. Many, it's, someone gave me The Power of Now a long time ago, and I read the first few pages and I put it back down. It was just intellectually, I wasn't ready for it. And that's totally okay, right? And I had to come back to it at a much later point, and then suddenly everything made sense, and I was ready to take it in. But then there's that third step, right, of integrating the wisdom, and that's the difficult part. And in my journey, it was hard to find actual practical advice. There's very few out there that go beyond the second step of the intellectual understanding. The advice on how to be practical about it is pretty thin. And Byron Katie probably does the best job at it. Her practice is fully focused on the questions and the worksheets. And I have not taken any of her classes myself, but I know many who have, and the effects are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So just based on that, I could highly recommend it. They're expensive though. Okay. But Pesh, back to your second part of the question is, when you thrive on human interaction and connection, how do you deal with a time like this? I was joking with somebody the other day that we're all becoming yoginis, because this is this alone time is core to introspection and really getting comfortable with yourself, becoming aware of yourself. And a lot of people have discomfort with that. We're not actually used to doing that a lot. And you could, from an evolutionary standpoint, see why. It's been a pack mentality, a herd mentality. You were safer as part of the group. And if an individual kind of walked off and did their own thing, it would weaken their own chances of survival and that of the group. So it was something that was frowned upon, and it's kind of in our bodies, this anxiety that being alone is unsafe. It's deep down, there's a kind of a genetic imprint of that. And you still feel that expressed in certain parts of the world where the cultures are more commonwealth, that the individual isn't supported as much. It's still about the whole. And there's great validity to that, absolutely. The answers ultimately lie in coming together to solve the world's needs. And really that's what's, a big part of what's happening right now, is to look beyond borders and realize we're all in this together, and it is one planet. So it'll get there, but it'll take some shock moments for everything to kind of more unite around our oneness, right, of one species. And then beyond that, the oneness of everything, not just living, but everything that exists. Right? There's a thing called the tall poppy syndrome. It's a social concept, I think, originated in New Zealand. It's a thing in Australia. People talk about it. And that's the idea that if you grow too tall, if one poppy grows too tall, it takes away the sun and the nutrients from everyone else. And everyone else just has to sit in the shade. And so that's kind of where that comes from. We're entering a phase as a species now where, for the first time, really, it's not about survival of the group, but making your own healing your priority is a new thing. And we're right at the beginning of that. And it is a really wonderful thing, but it's necessary, right? Because there's so much trauma and fear inside of us that's being passed down generation to generation, and they just get repeated. I know a lot of you responded to today's post, which was the Black Sheep post, right? The comments were, I couldn't respond fast enough because they were just coming in, and a lot of us identify with that. And I see, I see the resonance in myself as well. I'm fortunate enough to have everyone in my family essentially was a black sheep in their families. So, there's much more of a unity there for me, but I do deeply feel and empathize with all of you. Many of my friends that, struggle with being the odd person out in their family, and with friends as well that you grow up with. Your paths may kind of divert, and then you find yourself held back by them seeing you a certain way and wanting to keep you that way. It's not coming from a bad place. There's just trust and certain, reliability in that, and stability in knowing someone for who they are. So it's not coming from a bad place. If you've ever had a friend who, we're all subject to this. If you've ever had a friend who changed their name, you'll know, even you'll feel that in yourself, how difficult it is to suddenly shift and call them by their new name. It's a really hard thing to do. You've gotten used to seeing them a certain way and treating them a certain way and calling them a certain way, and now they want to be different. And to shift is a hard thing, even if you're fully supportive and you're full of love and want them to. You can feel it inside of you. It's like, oh, what just happened? So back to the second part of your question, Pesh. If you're used to human interaction as your source of nurturing, right? So we have introverts and extroverts. There's some jokes going around that all this time when people were required to go into work, that the introverts have been suffering, and the extroverts had their field day. We have the reverse situation now, right? Whenever there's a vacuum in life, sooner or later there seems to be some energy that comes in and switches things around. So that's what's happening, that people who love being among people are now having to be more on their own. And I posted a few things to that in the past week of how precious our alone time really is. Right? Andy, you changed your name last year. Oh, wonderful. Yes. That's a great strategy. Involve people in the process. That's a great strategy for all of life, by the way. So part of the challenge often when you have ideas and you're passionate about them and fervent, especially at work, and it's never a good idea to just kind of go into your cave, come up with solutions, and then come out waving, I've got the answers. It never works. I had to learn that lesson. I'm sure everyone else as well. It's important to include people. And it's not just you including them for the sake of lip service, but it's important to include them for you're better and you're greater and more powerful as a whole. If you've ever collaborated in smaller groups, especially larger groups, it might get a little watered down again. But the collective is definitely stronger and more creative than the individual. So involving others in the process of your own transformation is a beautiful idea, Andy. You can write something about that. Andy's a wonderful coach, business coach. Do I say that correctly? And she just launched her website. So yes, sounds like a great reinvention for you, Andy, and with a new name. And I only know you under the new name. Andy interviewed me, by the way, and her interview is on my website if you want some more details about me and my background. Wonderful. Hi, Ricky. Okay. So, Pesh, you're challenged in these times as a person who loves and thrives on connection to go within and find some of that connection within yourself. We come in wired a certain way, and there's always going to be a sweet spot. But a fully realized person is one that isn't particularly triggered by any situation. And if we were fully realized, then we probably wouldn't be in our bodies. We'd be vapor or something. So that's a far off goal. But in the meantime, we can work on the parts that we feel triggered by.